All right. Hello, everybody. This is Decryptolorian from the Well community, and welcome to Well FM's Project Showcase. Today, I'm here with co-founder and CEO of TR Lab, Adrio, and our special guest, artist Robbie Trevino. Robbie is a conceptual artist and illustrator who who specializes in surreal and sci-fi illustration and design. He is based in Seattle, Washington, and has worked professionally on AAA Games, TV, and film. Many of my favorite projects, such as Star Wars, Magic the Gathering, Valve, Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix, and much, much more. I am very, very excited to welcome both Robbie and Audrey to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, absolutely. And Audrey, for our viewers, yeah, you've been on quite a few times now, but if you could give a brief introduction to TR Labs and what the platform's about, that'd be good to kick us off.
For sure. Well, we haven't been back in a few weeks as we've been on break with our AI 2041 project, but it's always so nice to be back with the Well community. As a refresher, TR Lab is a platform that aims to pioneer art for a new generation. The full name of TR is actually Tabula Rasa, a Latin expression meaning blank slate. On a mission to create extraordinary works from the world's leading artists, we aim to make it easy for artists, collectors, and institutions alike to explore and realize all possibilities of NFTs and to unlock access to really one of a kind projects to give back to the art community. And the current project that we're so fortunate to be working with Robbie on is called AI 2041, that I think many of you in the chat may already be familiar with if you've been following along with the past few months. So author Li Kai-Fu and Stanley Chan, who are AI experts, co-wrote a book called AI 2041 that was released back in September. They reached out to us hoping to bring more art into the literature world, and we ended up coming up together with a project that's really one of the first of its kind collaboration between the art and literature worlds, where we work with amazing artists such as Robbie, who take inspiration from a great book about AI, which is also such a current topic and something that we all should really be thinking about, and to really bring in a new dimension to further understanding the book, but also adding appreciation of art into it. So super excited to be here today, and also really excited to dive into Robbie's background and what he's done with this Dreaming of Plentitude artwork. It's really amazing, and I'm fingers crossed. I want to be lucky as well because there are only 15 editions this time around.
Man, that was fantastic. Yeah, this project is so interesting. I've only had the pleasure of being able to interview a few people from it so far, but man, every time that you come on and bring us these wonderful artists, it's just so cool. And what you're doing is so different, and I guess fresh is a good word for it with the NFT space. So I'm super excited about it. Robbie, this is your first time here. And before I fanboy out a bit about some of the works that you do, if you want, please tell us about Robbie in your own words and your artistic journey.
I mean, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. Like, yeah, concept artist, illustrator, based in Seattle, Washington, currently. Not from here originally, from Detroit, from the Midwest. But yeah, no, I basically a job with what was it? AAA opportunity. It was my first studio gig was Xbox, and it was out here in Seattle. So that's what took me from essentially the Midwest to the West Coast. And since then, I've sort of been jumping around between studios and then working remotely, and then like I've had the fortune to have worked on like some really iconic properties. Like most recently, Star Wars. Before that, it was a lot of more experimental type stuff, like Love, Death, and Robots. Like no one knew that was going to be what it became at the time it was being made. A lot of these things happen. Some like more like long lasting, like long standing IPs too. Like I've done something like 10 years worth of Magic cards at this point. Like I have, here, I'll grab it real fast. I'm sitting on, at this point, I feel like Magic has given me more like merch or like loot, essentially, than like or free stuff rather than like actual paid work. But I'm sitting on like years worth of like artist proof cards. Like now that conventions aren't a thing anymore, like I have an apartment full of this stuff, like 10 years worth. So like I don't know how I'm ever gonna like, offload it, but like, yeah, I don't know. I've gotten to work on a lot of that stuff, and then so much stuff that as a concept artist and illustrator, like not a lot of people know, especially as a concept artist, you work on something and you can devote years of your life to it, and then it just never sees the light of day. Just completely axed, cutting room floor. I probably got more things that I can never show the world than things that I can, and I guess that's part of one of the cool things about the NFT space specifically is just it's such it's such an opportunity to sort of autonomously and like I guess you could say in a decentralized way, like work on your own projects at your own pace and like essentially pursue your own interests. And like the financial advantage being, you can find yourself in a situation where you have the runway to support yourself and the things you want to do. It's just really nice. There was a time when I was just working for people, and those opportunities were great, but like I never, between the collaborations and like the opportunities to just do your own thing in the space, I've never gotten so much of a chance to work with people, for people versus with people. So like it's just been nothing but awesome coming into the NFT space and getting to work with a few celebrities and like artists that you've admired for years, and then artists you never heard of but now you admire. It's just been awesome.
Man, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. I have a selfish question. I guess I'm allowed.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of Magic the Gathering and also Star Wars. And concept art to be specific. And
a man of taste. I see.
Yes,
culture
and taste, and honestly, the concept art for me is probably the most exciting. I just love looking at it, and I don't know if you've ever used Pinterest, but if you ever go on my Pinterest account, you're going to see like all concept art.
Send me a link to that. And yes, I have. Pinterest has suggested my own work to me, and I'm like, I made that. Like, what are you talking about?
That's so freaking awesome.
Yeah, send me that.
So my selfish question is, when you start working on these pieces, those concept art, do you tell us a little bit about the process? Like the behind the scenes stuff. Like, do they send you things? Do they give you the concept and then you just come up with it yourself, or do they? What is the process behind it? I'm just curious myself.
I feel like you just want to know what's happening at Lucasfilm. No, I'm just kidding.
a little bit.
You probably do, but definitely can't talk about that. Mickey is a mean man. I'll put it that way. The mouse. He's watch out. So they're pretty protective. But anyway, no. Let's see. Like I think the best way to explain this would be I'll use Magic the Gathering as an example because it's this card game. And we're talking decades. I think it's something like, I might be wrong, but like at least like 30, almost 30 years. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know exactly. A decade's worth of just lore and world building and established settings and characters. And they keep expanding because now the brand is so big. I would say like they're one of the more unique situations where instead of it being this unreleased thing like a game or a film that needs just like a core team in-house under NDA working on a thing in the shadows until it gets released to the public, you've got a card game, this massive RPG experience and a tabletop RPG. And what a lot of people don't know about Magic is like 95% of the art is outsourced, meaning there's a core team at Wizards of the Coast. I've been to the building. It's actually out here in Washington. It's in Renton, Washington, which is really close to where I live. It's not a big building. It's not a huge team. They world build settings like on the inside between writing and lore. And then, there's something called concept pushes, which are sort of like creative 3 to 4 week sprints where they used to, before COVID times and the long ago, before germs, they would bring people in-house and, for maybe, 30-ish days, give or take, a few weeks. They would do these creative role building sprints where it would just be sort of, I don't know if you've ever seen those like making of Star Wars videos where it's like George Lucas is like, writing notes on like the art wall of like people's concept art, like in a big wall, but like it's kind of like that in-house. You build a setting, and then you create, you know, essentially a world building guide, like an art Bible out of it, something almost like a pitch deck that you can send to just about anyone and they can sort of digest it and understand it. And they'll take that packet that was built during that creative sprint, once it's all, you know, perfect, and it's like, this is the vision, we just need people to execute. And then they will outsource across every corner of the world. You know, that's where the illustrators come in and they work on the cards. The cards are like the bulk of what needs to get done in that. And before I was doing magic pushes, I was doing just cards, and I would be one of those artists that would just, you know, get an email every, you know, few weeks about, you know, a art director would say, hey, we want you to, you know, work on this expansion, this setting. If you're interested, let us know your availability and we'll send you more info. And then the more info part is that world built guide. You know, I never knew that part. I would just go, okay, I'll do some cards for you. And then I did that. That was like the first 2 years of my career exclusively was just stuff like that. But then when I moved here and then I started getting more into the world building aspect of it, and I migrated from illustration to concept art and world building specifically, is when I started getting invited to these pushes and started seeing like how it actually is done from the inside out. And now I'm kind of on both ends. Like I'll do card assignments, I'll do world building. I gotta say the world building is way more fun. Like as much as I love the lore and the mythos and, you know, all the writing and the characters and the world development that is Magic the Gathering, like specifically like like doing the cards is almost like getting paid to just do, it's like your interpretation of someone else's idea, but like the world building is where you get to like literally just leave your artistic handprint like top to bottom and make the coolest thing you can imagine. And so like that's one example of like how these IPs are built. But usually if you're in games or film or TV, typically like you're just part of a team, you work on the inside. Like at Lucas, I can say, you know, like Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, like these are people like that, they're Hollywood elite, you know, and like they, you know, we'll have like calls with them and chat with them about the show, you know, like, and that's a very internal thing. There's no external help. It's very, you know, what's the word, small and tight knit, and that's kind of more like, I feel like that's like that 9 to 5 is more like just the world building sprint, but it's like a 24/7 kind of thing. You know, it's not random like freelance. But hopefully that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. And I'm so uh, interested in the process of things, and you know, and how things develop and how art develops. To me, that's probably the most interesting part of art in my mind. And so that's so cool, and that's probably why you took to this project really well, because it's it takes what you know, base it on something, and then you're able to create from that. So that's awesome. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
well, like also like the concept, AI 2041 is awesome, and you see that, and then you see the other artists who have participated in it. And you can't blame them either, and you just want to be a part of it as well. It's like an energy or like a momentum, I think.
yeah, and that's why I think this project is so fresh, and you know, the idea of it is just so fresh and interesting compared to, you know, other things in the NFT space. But before we get into the crazy details of it, I did want to show some of your NFTs. So, you know,
Yeah.
the next question for you is, you know, you've been doing all this traditional stuff for a really long time, with some, I mean, these are fantastic clients, right? What brought you into NFTs, and you know, what's your experience been like so far?
So, like as mentioned earlier, definitely like it's been a positive one. Overall, very positive. It's been interesting though. There's sort of a catch 22 for a lot of people, just because like at least in the artistic community, specifically like illustrators, concept artists, it's NFTs are still an incredibly divisive thing. Like there was essentially a civil war back in March between artists and artists. You know, just because of like misinformation, like, you know, opinions, like a lot of valid concerns. Like the problem is there isn't like a lot of, I don't think there's as much um, conversation, like productive conversation as there could be around it. So like there's been, you know, there's been that, but overall, that aside, you know, that, oh, that's a thing, that's a commission I did for lag, too much lag. You probably know him. but like, so basically I don't know. I was actually working on a concept push for Magic the Gathering. I remember this now. I was working on a push. This is back in like January, coming up on February, and a bunch of my friends, were saying hey, you should get on this NFT thing. And I remember only hearing, I like Beeple, essentially, who is Beeple, right? And even before he was, NFT Beeple, he was Beeple. So we all knew him, we all loved him. I knew he was getting into it. I'd seen some of his activity sort of from a distance, but I didn't quite understand it. And I didn't really appreciate it until, I think it was like whenever Mad Dog Jones had like his first big drop. I think it might have been the second one. Maybe I could be wrong though. It was a Crash and Burn, I think was the collection. I saw, I don't know, I saw it happening, and then I did a little more research, and I thought maybe my friends aren't crazy, and I remember them saying to me, like, just apply, like make your application video. Super Rare was one of the first places I applied to. Nifty Gateway. I think I have this strategy online to like get people's attention where I'll sort of make like a faux portfolio targeted at them, and then sort of just, hey, hey, you over there. Oh, I didn't notice you there. But hey, check out this art. Like, what do you think? Like, pretty cool, huh? Maybe you want to, and I did that with Nifty Gateway. I did it with Artifact Studios. I did it with a bunch of people, and like, it pretty much worked every time. It got their attention. Obviously, you need the work first, but I don't know. I was encouraged by friends, saw what was happening from a distance, didn't understand it, looked into it more, started to realize like the possibilities with like the tech potentially, and also the fact that like a lot of what's happening now, I'm definitely not like any kind of like prophet or anything, but a lot of what we see now, especially with like more pushes towards like mass adoption and like established brands coming in, some of them doing it right, some of them doing it wrong. I kind of realized like pretty quickly, I was like, this is like not going to go away. This could potentially be like the way of the future. Like, and I think it's still, like it's not perfect, like nothing is. Like things are constantly being improved upon and evolved. But yeah, I don't know. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't some like gold rush thing where it was just going to go away. Like, I mean, like, I'm not going to lie, the money and everything was like, whoa, like, and very interesting to me. But more so, I immediately was like, I don't think, like, a lot of people thought, kind of like when Trump was like, oh, this Corona thing will be gone by Easter. Like, it's kind of like, I think a lot of people thought, oh, this is just like a 1 month thing, and I was like, I don't think that's the case. This could be just like a new reality, essentially. So I just kind of jumped into it with a bunch of other people, and we all found each other in Discords. And I'm talking like all kinds of huge people. Like, I never thought I would talk to James Jean, the amazing fine artist. And he was just like in a Twitter chat with me and a bunch of other people being like, what's an NFT? And we were all like, I have no idea like what's happening, but like the world is spinning, and I'm just trying to like wrap my mind around this. And I didn't dive into it full tilt until after my concept push job was over. And then, I did some client work after that. I still have client work and I still do client work, but a lot of it's been like heavily NFT focused just because of how fast the space moves, especially in March and February. Oh no, sorry. It was, well, I guess it was kind of February, but more March and like mid to late April, when it was like white hot, is when yeah, if you blinked even for a second, it was like 10 years went by. So like yeah, it was this like nonstop convention where you're sort of like having sleepovers and hanging out with your friends. But it's like, imagine that, but like you're in Discord and you're only sleeping like 4 hours a night trying to figure out this whole NFT thing. And that was kind of how I got into it. And now here we are.
Yeah, here we are. And I think Audrey and myself and many people watching this also felt that, and we're still feeling it. And yeah, it's interesting to say, you just, I want to say that NFTs just feel natural. And especially, I can tell that you like sci-fi and fantasy type stuff like I do. And you probably grew up with video games as well. It just feels really, really natural to have NFTs, and I'm glad that you decided to jump on, because that energy is just contagious.
It really is. Like I visited home recently, from the Midwest, right? Detroit, and like that whole area. And like, every time I go back home, it's like going into a time bubble where it's like, I mean, don't even think NFTs, just think like, some people like question if they even have like the internet back home, right? And like, imagine trying to explain this. Like I had a bored ape that sold while I was like, eating dinner with my mom, like my deeply Midwestern mom. And she still, like, she wants to get into this too a bit, but she just, imagine trying to explain that. Like I have a portrait of like an ape and it's worth X amount. And and people are just like, their minds are blown. And it's still, it's a very, what's the saying? We early, it's a very, it is very much, everyone exists in their own bubbles, right? Just everyone does. And this is a very interesting bubble. I'll put it that way, like where things move like 10x the speed of like normal time and space. Like it's just like an alternate reality or something. It's really interesting.
It certainly is. I love it completely. And that's a great segue into the story that you've been working on with AI 2041.
Mhm.
And I want to read the book at some point. I haven't yet. But it's interesting with the project, with the chapter choosing, right? And you chose a particular one, dreaming of plentitude. Did I say
Yep.
that right? All right, good. Yeah, so please tell us a little bit about the chapter you chose and why you chose it.
So like initially the concept behind it is that, and like this is really what hooked me. Like it was the last description, chapter 10. The concept, the overall like bullet point is, it's Australia, it's the future, like poverty, like, and the need for like traditional gainful employment has been eliminated. How do people find purpose? And that is just the theme itself is something I've asked myself so many times, like even before the NFT thing, right? Let's say before artists had like infinite runway, and not infinite, but like when someone becomes a millionaire, especially as like a broke artist, like trust me, that's like some life-changing stuff right there. And most artists who all they want to do is just create art, they know their purpose. Like they have stories they want to tell. Like I've got a book project that is now, NFTs are now a facet of that, but this is something I've been working on since 2016, and I've gotten to bring it into the space a bit. It's been really rewarding. But NFTs aside, I would have found a way to work on that book regardless. That would have been my purpose. It would have given me something to live for, essentially. And like a lot of the people that I grew up with, like my mother, for example, she's only known a life of work. The concept of like being unemployed or like not serving like a societal purpose, per provisions, like that's not a possibility in her mind. That's not a possibility in most people's minds. Even before the art thing, I was raised that way. I was raised around a bunch of people that way: factory workers, assembly factory workers, people on welfare, not necessarily like in poverty, although I did meet a lot of those people too. And I'm not saying I was in poverty either. I definitely did not come from money whatsoever, though. So I've always had to work for everything that I've had. I was raised by someone the same way. The concept of, like what would, I asked that question, like how does someone find purpose? How would someone like my mother find purpose? How would someone like all the people I grew up with find purpose? These are people, like I said, who they've only ever known work, and the idea of not doing that because they aren't creative types, they aren't people with like tons of profound ideas. It's not to say they don't have anything to say or that they don't have their own unique thoughts or desires, but I think a lot of people in that situation, hey, you're jobless, as in like you don't need to do anything, like would be aimless. They would be full of doubt, confusion, fear. And like the piece itself, I don't know if you want to pull it up because it might be easier to like explain it while we.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like, essentially the way I look at it is societal structures, societal norms, just like the way of life as we know it, hypothetically, right? Let's think of it as this giant monolithic structure, like, and it's made of something, a material that's impenetrable, unchangeable, right? Like a lot of people, again, I'll go back to my mother, you know, like we discussed this before, like, you know, like the way she describes the only life she can imagine to me as, which is one full of work and, you know, debt and just, you know, and then you die, right? She says it in a way as if like that's all that ever could be, that's all that ever was and ever will be. So in a similar way, you know, I'm thinking like, what's a way to like describe that? Like, well, you know, there's scale, you know, because society, life can be this massive concept in our heads. And then, you know, the material itself, you know, it's cold, it's hard, you know, it's like a brushed, aged metal, you know, you could almost look at it as like a stone material potentially. But, you know, you've got all this hard external, all these hard external elements, you know, that sort of represent society. It's specifically in this case, it's like the mega structure of the portrait, right? It's a person. They sort of represent life and society as we know it. This portrait of a person, but in this process of sort of deconstructing the concept of society and what you think it was, what you think it should be, right, and all the various pieces that make that fit together, what you're gonna find is, like in my case, if someone said you don't need to work ever again, like for me, it would just be like cha-ching, the lottery, you won, you know, best trade ever. For a lot of people though, that would not be the case. Like, and I imagine this process, right, being told, like almost like if you had a specific religious belief or a life philosophy that you adhered to in like the most strict way, as soon as that's proven wrong, right, it fundamentally questions everything you know, like life as we know it. So I imagine that process would be filled with doubt, with, you know, fear, with uncertainty. There'd be a lot of questions. It wouldn't just be a beautiful thing for a lot of people. And like, so what you're left with when you strip apart all the expectations and on paper how someone should be, how you think they are, how life should be, society as we know it, what you're going to find is like their fears, their doubts, their insecurities, like their humanity. So I thought, why not convey that concept with essentially like a human figure, you know, stripped of all clothing, in like a vulnerable position, right? Like you're essentially, you know, when you break all of this stuff down, like we're just people, like on the inside, right? We're just people, like we don't have it all figured out. And again, I feel like in this particular example, you know, in the age of plentitude, just it is a beautiful thing. It is a chance for rebirth, for renewal, but there's a process involved with that, like going from the old world to the new, or I guess a more popular way to say it, like now it'd be like Web 2 to Web 3, right? Like, but it's like you know, like this is how I imagine it would go. This is how I would feel, because even though you know, I've benefited in many ways from being a part of this NFT journey, this space. You know, I've gotten to meet so many people and made all these amazing connections. You know, it's left me with a lot of questions myself. Like, where do you go from here? Like, what's next? And you know, before last year, I was in like a rinse and repeat cycle of essentially, you know, like most people who work these big studio gigs, they, you know, eventually they ask themselves, is this it? Like, I don't know. Am I just doing this? Is this all I'm meant for? You know? So in my mind, you know, even now, I'm not saying I'm going through some crazy metamorphosis, but, you know, even now I'm thinking like, what does it all mean? Like, where are we going? You know, I ask myself these things all the time. And then I see a story about, you know, basically the same thing, but on like a much more like black and white scale, which is like, no, you don't need to work anymore. Like society, like all provisions, you know, are there. Like, how do you find purpose? Like, and there's actually a character in the book too. Like if you go into the specific the story itself and you get away from just the description, which is really what inspired most of this. You know, you read about an elderly woman who's being taken care of, you know, and she essentially forgets like who she is. And that's something else that stuck with me too, because eventually the AI does help her remember, but we forget, we can forget where we came from, which is another interesting thing to me. And I see it a lot in the in this NFT community specifically. Not so much, I'm not naming anyone specifically, but just the idea that it's like there was a time where I was struggling so much financially, especially in the beginning of all this art stuff, like when I didn't have the client list I have now, or the I don't know if you want to call it pedigree or client, yeah, just the street cred, whatever you want to call it. I didn't have that, and especially then, oh my gosh, like just getting paid from anyone was absurd. We're talking one time a client took 3 years to pay me. That's how like bad this can be for artists.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, literally, it was a whole thing. But the point is, even before the NFT space, but now especially, right? Because we can see the kind of money that people can be fortunate enough to find themselves in. It can be really easy to sort of forget like who you were through all of this, like before all of this, and like I'm reminded of this constantly. If I ever go back home, I see, you literally see where you're coming from, right? It's home. It is just interesting to think about, like, and I kind of related to the elderly woman character in the book specifically too. Just the idea, that you're forgetting who you are. Like there were various elements that really like stuck out to me, like about the story, but the summary was really in a nutshell just something that I don't know if a lot of people are experiencing that or are going to. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but yeah, that really resonated with me specifically. Just the idea that like people will lose a sense of purpose, uh, and like what does that process look like essentially?
Wow.
Wow.
Take
That
a few.
was that was so amazing. I don't even know what to say. I think for me, I mean, I had obviously seen the artwork, and I've seen for me, it really hit me kind of the relationship between identity and purpose, where I think, especially in the current society, you're so defined by what you do. Like when you meet someone, the first thing they might ask is, "What do you do?" And that then defines how they see you, their first impression of you. And there's something about your artwork where it was kind of like stripping back the barricades and having your vulnerable self inside. I was on a trip with a couple friends back in December, and we were talking a lot about purpose, and is there any point in having a purpose, and like why should we build a life around purpose? And one of the questions that was brought up that I think about often and that popped into my head as I was looking at your artwork is this one question that was, who and what loved you into being? And it's such a deep question to think about, right? Because there's so many different ways you could answer the question. But what I love about your artwork is that it really draws back so much emotion to the surface, from how you can even think about it as in like how you present your outer shell to the world and how you're really feeling inside. And yeah, it's just so beautiful, but you said it way better than anyone else could ever. So I'm just sitting here taking it in. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, both perspectives are just fantastic, and honestly, the chat and Discord is it really resonates with them as well. I mean, I think you nailed it here with this art, and honestly, your description and even Audrey's take on it is just absolutely beautiful. So wow. Do you mind if I play the music behind it? Because we haven't really.
Yeah, go ahead. That was actually my friend. He goes by Aether Audio. His name's Jason Taylor. Shout out to Jason.
All right.
He's been a good, amazing friend. And also he's this incredible composer. And he like he's always like gifting me like little snippets and like really ambient, surreal. I had a nifty drop. I had a couple, but I had one back in July, and he scored the whole thing. And same artist here, essentially.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I just love how NFTs are bringing these things together, and this medium is just so cool. I'm gonna play it, and then we can
Yep.
talk about it.
Mhm.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
31 seconds of amazing ambient sound.
So I mean, like one of the thoughts behind that is, first of all, it's not a perfect loop. We really tried, but anyway, the thing about it though is the concept, like the actual sound bite itself, the musical chunk, it doesn't really have an ending or a beginning, and that's again, like I think I'm trying to sort of amplify the like that experience, that emotional process that is supposed to be represented in the actual piece itself, right? Like that, it like I just don't want it to feel like it could ever end, because I feel like that is a lot of times, we get lost in our heads, in our thoughts, in our emotions. We think like, will this ever end, right? Um, and yeah, that's what I was going for. I know, like in some cases, sometimes work on a piece together, and there'll be like a couple big moments, right, where it's like, here's a moment, and then another moment, or like there's the one big climactic moment, and everything else just kind of falls off after that. But I wanted this to feel like sort of a continuous, perpetual state of emotion. So that's the thinking there.
Man, oh wow, it's just yeah. I think it's hard to hard to put into words, but man, I mean, I just look at this, and everything that you've said is something that I've been feeling over the past couple of years. When COVID hit, everyone started thinking more about where their life's going. I mean, you get to the point where you're middle aged and you're saying, is work everything that am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? And when do I get to enjoy it? You work 80 hours a week or 70 hours a week, and you take a couple weeks vacation. When do you get to enjoy that? When do you get to be you again?
And even then, you still like, I have to just throw my phone like to the other side of the room when I'm with people now, because I'm like, be in the moment. Don't be checking Twitter. Oh, what's happening? Like, just like, stop. Like, oh my gosh, you're like removed from reality. Like, yes, we've become, through being super connected, we've become incredibly disconnected, and not just like from each other, but from a lot, like we've lost our way essentially in a lot of ways, like, and that's yeah, I don't know, like that's something that I think a lot of people go through in like varying degrees, for sure.
Man, yeah, and I mean it shows through your work, and even on some of the projects you've worked on, like robots on Netflix. I watched those episodes, and it's really deep thinking, and it's deep thought, and I love this. This is why I love this project so much, the AI 2041, is because a lot of the deep thought. It's not just an NFT. It's not just it's something more thoughtful, and I love it.
I think I just want to add, I completely agree with you. I want to add that part of what really attracted me to TR Labs and like AI 2041 was just like, oh my God, like it's just good art. Like it's art that is good art. Like it's not about, I feel like the space has developed a little bit of an issue with utility, like, or supposed utility attached to just art. Meaning, no, I like don't get the two like mixed up or conflated, right? Which is, I think, what is happening. It's the two serve their purpose, but as someone who just at the end of the day wants to tell stories and like moments and create worlds and create compelling art through visual experiences through artwork, when I saw what TR was doing, who they were working with, I thought this isn't like another like animal avatar or like some kind of like it's and those things have their place, but like this is just art. Like we're getting back to like strong, compelling stories and imagery and things that move you emotionally and make you question things, and just honestly just make you go like, wow, like that's a piece of art that really speaks to me. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what I'm more interested in than like anything else. And I feel like a lot of times we get away from that a little too much in the space personally, but yeah, this is why I believe in this project and like what they're doing as a platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I think like we think about art the very same way, where I think our focus is on art, and like you said, there are a lot of amazing NFT projects, but I do think that because everything moves so quickly in the space, that there has been this kind of weird expectation that's tied around art needing to have some sort of utility in order for it to be valuable. Whereas I think that, you know, there is art that comes with utility and it's great, but I also think that there are just beautiful pieces where artists could focus on their craft and the story and the world that they're building, and the focus is really on the art itself and the emotion that it draws out of you rather than anything else. And I think part of the other thing too that's we've really noticed in the space that, you know, whenever you bring up artists, it's usually, oh, they sold a certain amount, or their success is defined by the price of the artworks that they've sold. And I not obviously success could be measured by that. Like, I'm not saying that it couldn't, but I also think that there is something that's missing where, you know, people are not getting to know artists and the person behind the art and the meaning behind the art as much as they want to, because they're just looking at the price tag and they're just thinking about utility or flipping. So one thing that we really want to do in the project too is for people to get to know the artist better, and that's why for our whitelist application you have an artist quiz where you really just need to take a couple minutes to dig into the artist's background. But the purpose behind it that we want to do is to educate collectors a bit more about the artist, for there to be a closer connection between the community rather than just buying and selling.
I think that's the best way that you should do it. I think that's the way everyone should do it in this particular context. I like the biggest holders of mine, you know, and I'm talking about the collectors who have, you know, put down, you know, 20, 25, 30 ETH on pieces of mine. You know, these were conversations, you know, that eventually led to a sale, but we're talking 2-3 weeks of like, you know, conversation, you know, essentially bonding, building a relationship. Like, you want to invest in this. I see this all the time. I see people, they're looking for like the next project to invest in, and like from like a speculative investment point of view, you know, where you know, they want to make money and all that, like, very understandable. But like, I would rather see people invest in artists, you know, and whether that's like a fully doxed creative team that has some sort of reputation, you know, so you know who you're investing in, or whether it's, you know, an accomplished or unaccomplished one-man team, just a single artist, you know. I just like, when I had like big sales, it was because like the people who invested in me, you know, they said, I'm investing in you as like a person, as an artist, you know. And that's I think that's important, you know, is people need to understand like who they're backing. And we see the opposite of that too in the space, right? Where it's like some pump and dump scheme, and it's like, oh, who, you know, like it goes completely wrong, and it's like, oh, it turns out you didn't do any homework on, you know, these people, right? I know I'm getting a little like away from your point, but just like, I think it's important that people understand like what they're investing in and who they're investing in. And I think that's an amazing thing that you're doing as a platform, because I don't really think a lot of platforms do that. You might be one of the only ones.
Thank you. Yeah, we want to be, you know, really experimenting in different ways to bring the artists and the collectors closer together. And please stay tuned. We have a lot of exciting things coming up in the year, and I cannot share too much yet, but there are a lot of ways in which we're exploring that connection and how a community can be closer involved with an art project.
Yeah, I gotta agree with everything that was just said. I mean, I absolutely love what TR Labs is doing and the artists that are coming along. And you know, it's better. I'd rather have this in our space than a lot of the stuff that's going on. But I don't want to digress. But it really is a breath of fresh air, and that's what really drew me into NFTs in the beginning, was to be able to connect with the artists like you, Robbie, and say, you know, I love your art. I've probably been looking at your art for several years. I didn't even know it was yours. You know,
that's what happens when you just work for a company.
Yeah, and so being able, and this has happened so many times when I do these interviews, being able to see your art, and then I go, wait a minute, I've been looking at this stuff for years, you know, and that's what drew me to Magic the Gathering. It wasn't the gameplay is fun, exciting, and I love it. You know, I love strategy, but I love the art. Like I would spend hours just looking at the cards and looking at the art, you know, and then reading the little, you know, like you said, world building. You're putting little captions under the art. Some of them are funny, some of them are like, you know, in depth. But I like reading that stuff, and that's that. I mean, that's my love of concept art is there, and then actually putting a face and a person to that art is even better, you know, and that's why I would be one of your collectors, you know, and I would want to have that interaction with you. So I love it.
I appreciate that. And I agree. It's that is another thing that drew me into NFTs also, is just the idea that it's like we see the people behind the art essentially. And they, you know, it's not just something that is, it's not a company or a brand. It's a person now. They have a face. This is what they would be doing if no one was paying them to do it, sort of thing. A lot of times.
Absolutely. Just to transition, we're running low on time, but I did want to get to some of the audience questions.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't want to be too selfish. So our first question is, where do you source your inspiration from? Is this piece reminiscent? Wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm reading this wrong. This piece is reminiscent to me of the turn of the last century's perceptions of what the future would be like.
Yeah, so I mean, it's drugs. I do drugs. No, I'm just kidding. That's not. No. Believe me, that, like, I might have tried it a couple of times. Like with art, doesn't work. Not for me. As surreal as my work seems. No, I mean, a lot of times I'll draw from. Okay, there's a problem. There's a trend that will happen, right? Where like a lot of times, like art, especially as concept art, serves a purpose and in the end sells a particular product. When something becomes so homogenized and like repetitive, right? We see this with a lot of movies. I won't name anyone specifically, Marvel, that, you know, does like you know, it's almost kind of like a rinse and repeat formula in some cases. I love what they've done like as a world like building thing, but just like, you know, a lot of times inspiration is sourced from the same area and you're left with the same result each time, right? It's whatever, however that saying goes, like doing the same thing over a million times, expecting a different result is like the definition of insanity. I butchered that, but it's something along the lines of that. Like I don't look at art as much as a lot of people think. Like there are artists that I obviously draw inspiration from, you know, like Jean-Gerard Mobius, like Geiger, Sid Mead, you know, Dali, like, you know, like the hits, right? Sergio Topi, a lot of like European illustration and comic book artists. But like for instance, this project as a concept, right? It's like I wasn't really looking at art specifically. I was just thinking, I was flipping through some history, not like history books, but like images of history on Pinterest, funny enough, you know, like things like riots, protests. And yes, like a lot of statues, which I think was what the question was kind of homing in on, is there is sort of a, I don't remember the exact time period that this particular art is from, but do you remember the Batman Forever with like, who is it? Oh God, what was his name?
Oh yeah, was it Kilmer on this one?
Kilmer, yeah, Val Kilmer. That like classic Gotham architecture, right, where it's like stone gargoyles and, you know, like these monolithic, like, you know, human, like the Atlas figure, you know, like holding, or kind of like I guess like in the Spirit of Detroit is another good example, right? It's I don't remember like the time period or like the specific type of art, but it's just that monolithic human sculpture, right? It's almost like sort of a nod to David, Michelangelo's David, you know, like and like I very much, you know, I kind of thought of that a little bit, which is art technically, but you know, I was seeing it more like with, you know, like giant buildings, right? Giant symbols throughout history of what society was, what it represented, you know, like, and like where we could see it going, right? Which I think is like kind of what like it's almost like you would see those statues in like something like an ad for like the World's Fair from like, you know, like just go back like decades and decades, like half a century or something, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like if you crack open like those like classic sci-fi paintings and illustrations too. Like Sid Mead again is another great example, where it's like, you know, he's a visual futurist and he imagines, in a lot of cases, if it's not Blade Runner, right, it's like a very like beautiful future. And like I don't know, I think I was looking through moments in history and time and seeing like what we thought were like essentially like societal, you know, like society as we knew it, like what was it? And a lot of times it was just some exalted, powerful leader with a statue depicting their likeness. And in this particular piece, you know, that is kind of the vibe I was going for, was this sort of sculpted head, you know, of like kind of the idea of what we thought society was or what it ought to be. But that being said, like that's what I gathered inspiration from specifically for this piece. In a lot of cases, it could be art, it could be just a visual description, it could be music, it could be you know, like nature. Sometimes the biggest eureka moments I have doing art, no matter the assignment, they don't come from sitting down with a piece of paper and going, now the ideas are going to come. They come from when you're on the toilet or at the gym, you know, like they come out of nowhere. Like sometimes it takes like focusing on something else for that stream of thought to come in. So it's not just one particular source of inspiration. It's like a whole smorgasbord of them.
I love it. I love it. Art Deco industrialism.
There we go. I was like, I think it's Art Deco, but I don't want to like be wrong, and then someone be like, "You got it wrong."
No, I think you nailed it. It definitely gives me that vibe, and I love the puzzle piece aspect. But I'm not gonna go. I could talk about it for a long time. Next question: Do you see AI technology as potentially beneficial to anything you are currently working, or have a desire to work on in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. My process, my like aesthetic comes from, I mean, a lot of it is me, obviously, but a lot of it is technical limitation. Like my stuff looks, you know, essentially hand drawn because it is, you know, which is given me an identity as an artist in and outside of this particular space. But you know, it limits, you know, a handful of things, in one of which being like the actual literal end result of the artwork that I'm doing. Um, I think having like one rigid approach, you know, one process only, like in anything you do, it's extremely limiting. So the idea of never, implementing some sort of new, like whether it's like AI, like as a procedurally generated thing, or you know, more 3D into the work or more animation, you know, like I I'm always looking for ways to enhance my work, and I see AI as almost an inevitable like a progression of that. You know, it's, I don't want it to be like the definition of what I do, but like I want it to be a facet that like enhances that process. And I think, I mean, I've dabbled a little bit on like a very, very basic level. We're talking like the Wumba app, I think is what it's called, like on your phone, where you're just, you know, like mashing together like photography. But like even that, you know, sometimes my work will come from happy accidents. Like, you know, I could crumble up a piece of paper, throw it on the floor, and see something in the pattern of the folds, and then, you know, draw something on top of that, right? It isn't always a prolific, profound statement, you know, that like, you know, is like super deep and meaningful. Sometimes you see things in happy accidents, and, you know, AI generated imagery, you know, is like one way, you know, you could do that. I mean, the possibilities are endless. That's the wonderful thing about like technology as we advance forward, is like there's just infinite possibilities. So like, yeah, I definitely see AI as being something for me in the future.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, one last question, and then we'll talk quickly about the drop, and then we'll ease out. Given that question is, given that we still seem to be early in the NFT adoption phase, based on your earlier comments, what do you think will unlock broader adoption? Will it be the ease of fiat on-ramp, better retail consumer education, or something else?
I think it's going to be a combination of the two, the ease of fiat on-ramp and better retail consumer education. I've seen a lot of like, I don't want to like name any specific platforms, but like, for example, you know, collectors, the more barriers to entry you create for something new and misunderstood, the more difficult it's going to be for a lot of people, like as a whole, to understand, right? Like there's just some people get things quicker than others. some people don't want a challenge. They just want, they just want to get to what they want to get to in a straightforward fashion. I'm thinking of every time I've tried to refinance my student loans where I'm like in a labyrinth and I'm talking to like 15 different robots in like 5 different countries or something, right? Like in my case, like I know as someone who can get easily frustrated by like processes of learning, that like, again, the barriers to entry, in this case, the ease of fiat on-ramp, like I would much like I'm probably going to jump to something, that says, hey, you can use your actual, fiat money, as someone who doesn't understand crypto or NFTs, I could use real money, air quotes, I'm going to find that much more palatable and appetizing than say like, oh, you need to like figure out what this is and then create 10 wallets and then transfer this and then that. And then, so, it'll be a combination of that. And then just education, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like, if you don't understand something, like you're just going to have questions. And like, there's so many things that we need to learn about, and not just, this crypto NFT stuff, but I mean, like, there's all kinds of things that we're not educated on, like, and we should be more, right? We're not, right? But like, knowledge is power, education is key. Like, I think those two, it's going to be it's going to vacillate and be some sort of hybrid between those two. Like, I don't know what that looks like, but I do know, again, as someone who gets incredibly like frustrated with like processes sometimes, like the less barriers to entry, the better. And like, if you can ease someone into the concept of something, maybe that will be an easier sell, right? It's kind of like, if you've ever heard of insert your favorite, person in the running for like a political position, right? But their ideas are too radical, even though they're good, the world isn't ready for it. So you got to like, dial it back and like approach it from a slower trajectory, if that makes sense.
Total sense. It was like computers back in the day, and now you were telling your parents, hey, use it this way, and then, oh, I can't use this stupid thing, and then they're over on fast forward on their iPhones just texting up a storm and using all the social programs that you don't even know how to use. So
oh yeah, my mom can barely send a text message, and she's like, teach me crypto, and I'm like, one thing at a time. Like, hold on. Like
all right. So before we take off, let's talk about the drop real quick.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when it is and everything. So maybe Audrey, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so the drop is priced at 0.45 ETH. There are 15 editions. The whitelist sale is starting in, I believe, just in 10 a.m. ET tomorrow. So that's 22 hours. It actually just closed, and the public sale will start Friday at 10 a.m. ET as well.
Man, that's awesome. So, what do people have to do to get ready? They just have to wait. The whitelist is still going on, like you said.
So the whitelist application actually just closed a few
gotcha.
minutes ago. And that's where I mentioned the artist quiz, and people will find out whether they're on the whitelist tonight at 12 a.m. ET, and then tomorrow at 10 a.m. until Friday at 10 a.m. they'll have 20. If they successfully applied and get on, they'll have 24 hours to purchase.
Amazing. My brain was a little bit slow to that, but if so, next time I'm just going to throw the Discord link into the chat, and next time if you're interested in getting watch for those announcements and whatnots, and so then we have 15 editions, and then we'll wait for it to go live. That's awesome.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having us on. And Robbie, thank you so much for your beautiful words. I always get so inspired after I speak to you. And
oh, thanks.
we're excited for everything to come.
Yeah, I love Robbie. I love meeting you and your perspective. And Audrey, as always, this platform is amazing. I love what you're doing. We love what you're doing. Well, community is big supporters of it. And with that, I am going to lead us out with playing this beautiful ambient music again. And again, thanks for coming. If you guys want to stay on for a few seconds after, we could chat for a few seconds. But thank you everybody for watching, and listen to this as we go. I gotta turn it on.